Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the twisted metal wreckage on his scanner. The alien ship had crashed hard into the rocky surface of the moon, leaving a trail of debris that stretched for nearly a mile. He adjusted his helmet and checked his oxygen levels before stepping out of his rescue pod. The distress signal had come through weak and broken, but Jake knew someone might still be alive inside that mess of metal. As a search and rescue specialist for the human exploration ship Aurora's Dream, he had seen plenty of crashes before. This one looked bad, but he had pulled people out of worse situations. The alien ship was unlike anything in human databases. Its hull was made of some kind of purple metal that seemed to shift colors in the pale moonlight. Strange symbols covered the sides, and what looked like weapon ports were scattered along its length. Jake approached carefully, his scanner beeping as it detected life signs somewhere deep inside the wreckage. He found an opening where the hull had split open during impact. The inside of the ship was dark and filled with smoke that made his eyes water even through his suit's filters. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting red shadows on the walls. Jake moved slowly through the twisted corridors, following the life sign readings on his scanner. The beeping grew stronger as he climbed over fallen support beams and around chunks of broken machinery. Then he heard it, a weak crying sound that made his heart race. Someone was definitely alive in here, and they sounded young. Jake found the source of the crying in what looked like a living area. A small alien child was trapped under a heavy metal beam, blood pooling around her tiny body. She looked nothing like a human child, with pale blue skin and large violet eyes that stared up at him with fear and pain. Her breathing was shallow and quick. The child tried to speak but only made soft clicking sounds that Jake couldn't understand. Her eyes were full of tears, and one small hand reached toward him as if asking for help. Jake felt his training kick in as he knelt beside her and began checking for injuries. The metal beam had crushed her left leg and probably caused internal bleeding. Jake knew he had to work fast. He activated his emergency medical kit and began setting up a portable life support unit. The child watched him with those huge eyes, and Jake tried to smile reassuringly through his helmet visor. Getting the beam off her was the hardest part. Jake used his suit's power winch to lift it slowly while trying not to cause more damage. The child cried out in pain as the pressure released, but she was finally free. Jake quickly wrapped her injuries and connected her to the life support system. His scanner showed that her blood was very different from human blood, but the basic life signs were similar enough that his equipment could help stabilize her. Jake made the difficult decision to use his emergency medical nanites, tiny robots designed to help heal human injuries. His ship's computer would have to modify them to work with alien biology. Jake lifted the child carefully and began the slow journey back to his rescue pod. She was so light that he barely felt her weight, but she was getting weaker with each passing minute. Her breathing became more labored, and her skin started turning a darker blue color that Jake guessed meant she was in serious trouble. Back in his pod, Jake worked frantically to keep the child alive during the trip back to the Aurora's Dream. He held pressure on her wounds while monitoring her vital signs and talking to her in a calm voice, even though she probably couldn't understand him. Her small hand gripped his finger with surprising strength. The Aurora's Dream's medical bay was ready when Jake arrived. Dr. Amy Rodriguez and her team immediately took over the child's care, working alongside the ship's artificial intelligence to adapt human medical procedures for alien biology. Jake stayed by the child's side, unwilling to leave her alone in a strange place. Hours passed as the medical team fought to save her life. The child, who they learned was called Kirathes from her ship's computer, needed surgery to repair internal damage. Jake donated some of his own blood when they discovered that modified human blood could help replace what she had lost. During the transfusion, something unexpected happened. The child's biology seemed to react to Jake's blood in a way that went beyond simple medical treatment. Her skin took on a faint glow where the blood entered her system, and her vital signs stabilized more completely than the doctors had expected. Captain Lisa Harper called Jake to the bridge while Kirathes was recovering. Through the view screen, Jake could see a massive alien warship approaching their position. It was 10 times the size of the Aurora's Dream, with weapons that could destroy them easily. The ship's computer identified it as belonging to the Zephyrian Empire, a warrior race known for their fierce pride and territorial nature. The alien ship sent a message demanding the return of their young. Captain Harper negotiated carefully, explaining that they were only trying to help the injured child. The Zephyrian commander, who called himself War Commander Veltar, agreed to board the Aurora's Dream to retrieve Kirithess. Jake was in the medical bay when the Zephyrian delegation arrived. They were tall, elegant beings with silver-scaled skin and flowing hair that seemed to glow with its own light. Their leader wore ornate armor and carried weapons that looked both beautiful and deadly. War Commander Veltar approached Kirithess with obvious concern, speaking to her in their clicking language. The child responded weakly but seemed happy to see familiar faces. Then Veltar noticed Jake standing nearby and his expression changed completely. The Zephyrian leader studied Jake with intense interest, then spoke with Dr. Rodriguez about the treatment his people had provided. When he learned about the blood transfusion and the unusual reaction it had caused, Veltar's eyes widened with what looked like shock. Veltar approached Jake and spoke in accented but clear English. He explained that by sharing blood with Kirithess, Jake had created something called a life bond according to Zephyrian culture. This was a sacred connection that carried serious responsibilities and obligations. Jake didn't fully understand what this meant, but he could see that his simple act of trying to save a child's life had created complications he never expected. The Zephyrians took Kirithess back to their ship for further treatment, but Veltar made it clear that this was not the end of their interaction with Jake Morrison. 3 months had passed since Jake saved the alien child, and he thought the incident was behind him. The Aurora's Dream was docked at Frontier Station Alpha for supplies and crew rest. Jake spent his free time in the station's observation deck, watching ships come and go through the massive docking bays. He still dreamed about Kirithess sometimes. Those large violet eyes and the way she had gripped his finger during the medical treatment haunted his sleep. Jake wondered if she had recovered fully and if she remembered the human who had helped her. He hoped she was living a normal, happy life somewhere in Zephyrian space. Jake was eating lunch in the station's main cafeteria when the alarm started ringing. Emergency broadcasts announced that a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel was requesting permission to dock. This was unusual because the Zephyrians rarely visited human stations, preferring to meet in neutral space when diplomacy was necessary. Captain Harper called Jake to the command center, where Ambassador Carl Stevens was already reviewing diplomatic protocols. The Zephyrian ship was beautiful and elegant, nothing like the warship they had encountered before. Its hull was decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift in the starlight. The message from the Zephyrian ship was formal and direct. They requested a meeting with Lieutenant Jake Morrison regarding matters of family honor and ancient law. Ambassador Stevens looked confused because human databases contained very little information about Zephyrian customs, especially those involving family relationships. Jake felt nervous as he prepared for the meeting. He wore his dress uniform and tried to remember everything he could about Zephyrian culture from the brief reports in their computer files. Captain Harper and Ambassador Stevens would accompany him to the neutral conference room, where the meeting would take place. The Zephyrian delegation was smaller than expected. Only 3 individuals came aboard the station, but their presence filled the entire conference room with an aura of power and authority. The leader was a female who stood nearly 7 feet tall, with silver-scaled skin that reflected the room's lights like polished metal. Her hair flowed like liquid light, changing colors from deep blue to bright silver as she moved. She wore robes that seemed to be made from the same material as starlight itself, and her jewelry included gems that Jake had never seen before. Her eyes were the same violet color as Kirithess, but older and filled with wisdom and strength. She introduced herself as High Matriarch Thalanix, and Jake realized with shock that she was Kirithess's mother. She spoke perfect English in a voice that was both musical and commanding. Her 2 companions remained silent but alert, their hands never far from their weapons. Thalanix began the meeting by thanking Jake for saving her daughter's life. She explained that Kirithess had recovered completely and was now stronger than ever before. The medical procedures that Jake and his team had performed were beyond anything Zephyrian medicine could have accomplished in time to save her life. But then Thalanix's tone changed, becoming more formal and serious. She explained that Jake's actions had triggered ancient Zephyrian laws that hadn't been invoked in over 1,000 years. By bonding his blood with her daughter and saving her life through personal sacrifice, Jake had proven himself worthy according to the oldest traditions of her people. Jake listened with growing concern as Thalonix described how Zephyrian society worked. Females chose their mates based on demonstrated worthiness, particularly acts of selfless courage and protection of the young. Jake's rescue of Kirithess was exactly the kind of proof that Zephyrian culture valued most highly. Ambassador Stevens tried to interrupt with questions about diplomatic immunity and human law, but Thalonix politely but firmly explained that this was not a matter for governments to decide. This was about personal honor and family obligation, concepts that transcended political boundaries. Thalonix then made her stunning announcement. According to Zephyrian law and custom, Jake Morrison now belonged to her family unit. She claimed him as her mate and Kirithess's adoptive father. She offered him a life of honor, power, and purpose within the Zephyrian Empire that few humans could ever imagine. The silence in the room stretched for long minutes as everyone processed what they had just heard. Jake felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. He had expected maybe a reward or a formal thank you ceremony, not a marriage proposal from one of the most powerful beings in known space. Jake found his voice and politely but clearly declined the offer. He explained that humans believed in free choice when it came to relationships and marriage. He was grateful for the honor, but he couldn't accept being claimed by someone he barely knew. Regardless of cultural traditions or ancient laws, Thalonix's expression showed confusion and what might have been hurt feelings. She asked Jake to explain why he would refuse such an honor. In her culture, being chosen by a high matriarch was the highest achievement any male could reach. She offered him wealth, status, and the chance to help shape the future of two civilizations. Jake tried to explain human concepts like love, courtship, and getting to know someone before making life commitments. He talked about the importance of choice and mutual consent in relationships. Thalonix listened carefully, but it was clear that these ideas were foreign to her way of thinking. Ambassador Stevens attempted to negotiate some kind of compromise, but Thalonix made it clear that this was not a diplomatic matter. She was personally claiming Jake according to laws that were older than human civilization. However, she was willing to give him time to understand the honor he was being offered. Thalonix announced that she would give Jake one cycle of their moon to reconsider his decision. She explained that refusing such an offer was unprecedented in Zephyrian history and might be interpreted as an insult to her family's honor. She hoped that Jake would use this time to understand the benefits of joining her family. Before leaving, Thalonix activated a small device that projected a holographic image of Kirithess. The child looked healthy and happy, but she spoke a message in her own language that Jake couldn't understand. Thalonix translated, explaining that her daughter wanted to thank the kind human who had saved her life and hoped to see him again soon. The meeting ended with Thalonix and her delegation returning to their ship, but she made it clear that this was not over. Jake was left feeling overwhelmed and confused. His simple act of compassion had somehow led to marriage proposal from an alien warrior queen, and he had no idea how to handle the situation. Captain Harper and Ambassador Stevens assured Jake that they would support whatever decision he made, but they also pointed out that rejecting Thalonix could have serious diplomatic consequences. The Zephyrian Empire was powerful and potentially dangerous, and insulting one of their leaders might put human colonies at risk. Jake returned to his quarters feeling like his entire life had been turned upside down. He stared out his window at the Zephyrian ship and wondered what kind of future awaited him, regardless of what choice he made. Jake hoped that returning to duty aboard the Aurora's Dream would help him forget about his encounter with Thalonix. The ship received orders to explore the outer rim systems far from Zephyrian space. Jake threw himself into his work, leading rescue training exercises and maintaining the ship's emergency equipment. But Thalonix had not forgotten about him. The first sign came when Captain Harper called Jake to her ready room. A cargo ship had just delivered several packages addressed specifically to Lieutenant Jake Morrison. The packages contained gifts unlike anything Jake had ever seen before. The first box held a piece of metal that seemed to shift between different colors as Jake moved it in the light. Dr. Rodriguez confirmed that it was an unknown alloy worth more than the Aurora's Dream itself. The second package contained what looked like a piece of jewelry, but scans showed it was actually a sophisticated communication device that could work across vast distances. More gifts arrived over the following weeks. Ancient artifacts that human archaeologists would have given anything to study. rare minerals that could power their ship for years. Each gift came with a message from Thalanix, written in perfect English, explaining the significance of each item in Zephyrian culture. Jake tried to return the gifts, but Zephyrian ships always refused to accept them back. Captain Harper suggested that Jake keep them to avoid causing a diplomatic incident. The crew started calling Jake's quarters a museum because of all the alien artifacts filling the space. The situation escalated when Jake received new assignment orders that made no sense. Instead of continuing their exploration mission, the Aurora's Dream was reassigned to joint operations with alien forces. Every new assignment seemed to bring them closer to Zephyrian space, and Jake began to suspect that Thalanix was using her influence to manipulate his career. His suspicions were confirmed during a supply run to a border station. Commander Bradley, the station's leader, congratulated Jake on his pending promotion and transfer to the diplomatic corps. Jake had never applied for any such position, but the orders came from the highest levels of human command and couldn't be questioned. Jake realized that Thalanix was systematically arranging situations where they would meet again. She was using her political power and influence to reshape his life according to her plans. The gifts weren't just tokens of affection, they were demonstrations of the kind of power and resources she could provide if he accepted her offer. The most dramatic demonstration came during what should have been a routine salvage operation in the Cygnus debris field. The Aurora's Dream was part of a small fleet, recovering valuable materials from the wreckage of an ancient battle. Jake was leading a team aboard a derelict ship when their sensors detected incoming vessels. Pirates had been using the debris field as a hiding place, and they weren't happy about human ships disrupting their territory. 3 heavily armed pirate vessels surrounded the small human fleet, demanding that they surrender all their cargo and leave immediately. The pirates were known for killing crews even after they surrendered. Captain Harper tried to negotiate, but the pirates weren't interested in talking. They opened fire on the human ships, and it quickly became clear that the small human fleet was outgunned. Jake and his team were trapped aboard the derelict ship as explosions rocked the hull around them. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, Jake's communications device detected new ships entering the area. A full Zephyrian battle group emerged from hyperspace, led by a massive flagship that Jake recognized as Thalanix's personal vessel. The sight of Zephyrian warships made the pirates panic and try to escape. What followed was a demonstration of Zephyrian military power that left Jake speechless. Their ships moved with impossible grace, weaving through the debris field like dancers while firing weapons that turned pirate vessels into expanding clouds of vapor. The battle was over in minutes, with not a single pirate ship escaping. Thalanix herself led the boarding party that rescued Jake's team from the derelict ship. She fought with deadly precision, moving through the damaged corridors like a force of nature. Jake watched her dispatch 3 armed pirates without even breathing hard, her movements beautiful and terrifying at the same time. After the rescue, Thalanix insisted on personally treating Jake's injuries in her ship's medical bay. Her touch was surprisingly gentle as she cleaned cuts and bandaged wounds with equipment far more advanced than anything humans possessed. She worked in silence for a while before finally speaking. Thalanix explained that she had been monitoring human communication channels and detected the distress calls from the debris field. She had brought her fleet to help not just because Jake was there, but because protecting those who couldn't protect themselves was a fundamental part of Zephyrian honor. Jake thanked her for saving his life and the lives of his team, but he also confronted her about the gifts and the manipulation of his assignments. Thalanix didn't deny what she had been doing. She explained that in Zephyrian culture, persistent courtship was expected and respected. She was simply following the traditions of her people. But then Thalanix revealed something that changed Jake's understanding of the entire situation. She told him that Zephyrian society was slowly dying. Their rigid traditions and constant warfare had led to declining birth rates and increasing isolation from other species. Her people were becoming extinct, and she believed that humans might hold the key to their survival. She had studied human behavior extensively since their first meeting. What impressed her most wasn't human technology or military capability, but humanity's capacity for showing mercy to strangers. Jake's willingness to risk his life for an alien child represented something that Zephyrian society had lost centuries. Thalanix believed that a union between their species could bring new life to her people and new strength to humanity. She wasn't just pursuing Jake because of ancient laws or personal desire, but because she genuinely believed their partnership could help both civilizations thrive in a dangerous galaxy. Jake began to understand that this wasn't just about him anymore. Thalonix was carrying the hopes and fears of her entire species. She was trying to find a way to save her people from extinction, and she had decided that he represented the best chance for that salvation. But Jake also realized that Thalonix was trying to force this destiny rather than allowing it to develop naturally. Her methods might be well-intentioned, but they still involved manipulation and coercion. True partnership required trust and choice, not obligation and ancient laws. As Jake prepared to return to his own ship, he looked into Thalonix's violet eyes and saw not just a powerful alien leader, but a person who was genuinely afraid for the future of her people. He began to wonder if there might be a way to help her that didn't require him to give up his own freedom and identity. The rescue operation had shown him that Zephyrians and humans could work together effectively when they shared common goals. Perhaps the solution to Thalonix's problem wasn't an ancient marriage law, but a new kind of partnership between equals who chose to work together for mutual benefit. The situation with Thalonix took a dangerous turn when Jake learned about growing opposition within Zephyrian society. War Marshal Krendak, one of the most powerful military leaders in the Empire, had begun openly criticizing Thalonix's pursuit of a human mate. He called her actions a betrayal of pure Zephyrian blood and ancient traditions. Ambassador Stevens briefed Jake on intelligence reports showing that Krendak was gathering support among conservative Zephyrian leaders who viewed any mixing with alien species as weakness. They believed that Thalonix's fascination with humans was making her unfit to lead, and they were preparing to challenge her authority. Jake felt responsible for the growing crisis. His simple act of saving a child had somehow triggered a civil war among one of the galaxy's most powerful species. He worried that innocent people would die because of political forces he couldn't control or understand. The crisis came to a head when Thalonix's flagship, the Stellar Crown, was attacked by rebel forces while en route to a diplomatic meeting. Jake was aboard the Aurora's Dream nearby when they received Thalonix's desperate distress call. Her ship was surrounded by 3 rebel vessels, and her defenses were failing. Captain Harper wanted to maintain neutrality and avoid involving humans in an alien civil war, but Jake couldn't stand by while Thalonix faced death. He volunteered to take a shuttle and attempt a rescue mission, arguing that they owed her a debt for saving their lives in the debris field. Jake's shuttle managed to dock with the Stellar Crown during a brief lull in the battle. The inside of Thalonix's ship was a war zone, with fires burning in the corridors and emergency lights flickering. Jake made his way to the bridge where he found Thalonix directing her crew's defense efforts. She was wounded but still fighting, her silver hair streaked with blood and her elegant robes torn. When she saw Jake, her expression showed surprise mixed with something that might have been relief. She hadn't expected any human to risk their life to help her, especially given the complicated situation between them. The battle gave Jake his first real look at Zephyrian society beyond the formal meetings and diplomatic encounters. He saw crew members who fought with incredible bravery, willing to die for their leader and their beliefs. He also saw the pain in their eyes as they fought against other Zephyrians who had once been allies and friends. Thalonix explained the tactical situation, while her weapons officer returned fire at the rebel ships. Krendak wanted to capture her alive so he could put her on trial for betraying Zephyrian purity. He had superior numbers and firepower, but Thalonix's crew was more loyal and better trained. The battle took another terrible turn when the rebels managed to transport a boarding party onto the Stellar Crown. Jake found himself fighting alongside Zephyrian warriors as they tried to repel the invaders. He had never seen combat like this before, with energy weapons that could cut through metal and warriors who moved faster than human eyes could follow. During the fighting, Jake learned something that changed everything he thought he knew about the situation. One of the rebels shouted that they had captured Kirithes and were holding her hostage aboard their flagship. Thalonix's composure cracked when she heard this news, and for the first time Jake saw real fear in her eyes. Krendak contacted the Stellar Crown and offered to exchange Kirithes for Thalonix's surrender. He wanted to end what he called her contamination by alien influence and restore traditional Zephyrian values. Thalonix was torn between saving her daughter and protecting her people from a leader who would drag them back into centuries of isolation and warfare. Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He volunteered to attempt a rescue mission to save Kirithess from the rebel flagship. The plan was nearly suicidal, requiring him to infiltrate a heavily defended enemy ship using only human stealth technology and his limited knowledge of Zephyrian customs. Thalonix initially refused to allow the mission, saying she wouldn't risk Jake's life for her family problems. But Jake pointed out that Kirithess was also his responsibility, according to the life bond they had created. He had saved her once before, and he wasn't going to abandon her now. The infiltration required Jake to use everything he had learned about Zephyrian culture and technology. He disguised himself using a holographic projector and moved through the rebel ship by following maintenance tunnels that his smaller human size allowed him to access. Jake found Kirithess in a detention cell deep inside the rebel flagship. She was older now and clearly frightened, but she recognized him immediately. Her face lit up with joy when she saw the human who had saved her life, and she spoke his name in her own language with perfect pronunciation. The escape was the most dangerous thing Jake had ever attempted. Alarms blared throughout the rebel ship as he carried Kirithess through corridors filled with armed warriors looking for them. Jake's knowledge of Zephyrian technology helped him disable security systems, but they were still vastly outnumbered. They almost made it to Jake's shuttle when Krendak himself appeared, blocking their path with a squad of elite warriors. The rebel leader was even larger and more intimidating than other Zephyrians Jake had met. With scars that told of countless battles and eyes filled with cold hatred for anything that wasn't purely Zephyrian, Jake knew he couldn't fight Krendak and his warriors, but he also knew he couldn't let them recapture Kirithess. He activated his shuttle's emergency beacon and prepared to make a final stand, hoping that Thalonix would somehow be able to help them. The rescue came from an unexpected source. Loyal Zephyrian troops, led by War Commander Veltar, had managed to board the rebel flagship and were fighting their way toward Jake's position. The battle that followed was chaos, with energy weapons lighting up the corridors and warriors from both sides, fighting with desperate intensity. Jake was caught in the crossfire and took several hits from energy, weapons that his human armor couldn't fully deflect. As he collapsed, badly wounded and losing consciousness, he saw Thalonix herself arriving to join the rescue effort. She fought her way through the rebels with terrible grace, her concern for Jake and her daughter driving her to acts of incredible bravery. The last thing Jake remembered before passing out was Thalonix kneeling beside him, her hands glowing with some kind of energy as she tried to stabilize his injuries. She was speaking in her own language, but her tone was gentle and desperate, like someone trying to call back a soul that was slipping away. When Jake woke up, he was in the medical bay of the Stellar Crown, but something was different. He could feel Thalonix's presence in his mind, a warm connection that allowed him to sense her emotions and thoughts. She had performed some kind of emergency life-bonding ritual to save his life, creating a permanent link between them. Through this mental connection, Jake finally understood Thalonix's true feelings. Her pursuit of him hadn't been based only on ancient laws or political calculations, but on genuine love and respect for his character. She had seen in him the partner she had always hoped to find but never expected to discover in an alien species. The bond also allowed Jake to feel the depth of Thalonix's fears for her people and her desperate hope that cooperation with humanity might save her civilization. She wasn't trying to conquer or control him, but to find a way to bridge the gap between two very different species who might need each other to survive. The rebellion ended with Krendak's defeat and capture, but Jake's life had changed forever. The mental bond with Thalonix meant he could feel her emotions and thoughts, while she could sense his feelings in return. This connection had saved his life, but it also meant they would always be linked whether they chose to be together or not. Jake spent several weeks recovering from his injuries while learning to deal with the strange new connection in his mind. Thalonix was patient and gentle, helping him understand how to control the mental link so it wouldn't overwhelm him. During this time, Jake got to see a side of her that no human had ever witnessed before. Away from formal ceremonies and political pressures, Thalonix was warm and caring, especially with her daughter Kirithess. Jake watched them together and saw the deep love between mother and child. Kirithess had grown attached to Jake during his recovery, often sitting beside his bed and practicing her English while telling him stories about Zephyrian culture. But Jake also felt the weight of expectation from both humans and Zephyrians. Ambassador Stevens visited regularly, making it clear that the human government saw tremendous value in a formal alliance with the Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Betty Cole arrived from Earth with orders suggesting that Jake's personal sacrifice could prevent a war that might cost millions of lives. The pressure from his own people was difficult to handle, but Jake also felt pulled by his growing understanding of Zephyrian society. Through his bond with Thalonix, he experienced their rich culture, their deep sense of honor, and their genuine fear about the future. He began to see that they weren't the cold warriors that human intelligence reports described, but a people struggling with change. Jake's sister, Kate Morrison, came all the way from Earth to see him, along with his best friend, Lieutenant Ryan Pierce. They were shocked by how much he had changed since the bonding ritual. Jake seemed more confident and aware of things around him, but they worried that he was losing his human identity. Kate and Ryan urged Jake to come home with them, arguing that he didn't owe the Zephyrians anything beyond what he had already given. They reminded him of his life on Earth, his family, and the dreams he had before this whole situation started. They couldn't understand why he would consider giving up everything human for an alien culture. But the most surprising development came when Thalonix made an unexpected announcement. During a formal meeting with human and Zephyrian representatives, she declared that she was releasing Jake from all obligations under Zephyrian law. She had come to understand human concepts of choice and consent, and she realized that forced partnerships couldn't create the genuine cooperation her people needed. Thalonix explained that her time with Jake had taught her valuable lessons about leadership and the importance of willing cooperation. She had seen how humans worked together not because of ancient laws or social hierarchy, but because they chose to support each other. This was the kind of unity her own people needed to survive. She announced that if Jake chose to leave, she would honor his decision and never pursue him again. However, she also warned that their mental bond meant they would both feel incomplete without each other. This was a consequence neither of them had fully understood when she performed the life-saving ritual. Jake realized that Thalonix had grown and changed through their interactions, becoming more open to new ideas and less bound by rigid tradition. She was willing to let him go even though it would cause her pain, because she had learned that true love required freedom of choice. The revelation made Jake think deeply about what he really wanted from life. He had seen two civilizations that could benefit greatly from working together, but only if they approached each other as equals, rather than through conquest or obligation. He had also developed genuine feelings for Thalonix that went beyond the artificial bond between them. Jake spent days walking through the gardens aboard Thalonix's ship, thinking about his future while Kirithis played nearby. The young Zephyrian had become like a daughter to him, and he couldn't imagine never seeing her again. But he also couldn't imagine abandoning his own species and everything he had known before. The answer came to Jake during a conversation with Dr. Rodriguez, who had arrived to study Zephyrian medical technology. She pointed out that Jake didn't have to choose between being human and being part of Zephyrian society. Perhaps there was a third option that no one had considered before. Jake proposed his solution during a joint ceremony aboard Frontier Station Alpha, with representatives from both species present. Instead of simply accepting or rejecting Thalonix's claim, he suggested creating something entirely new. He would serve as a bridge between their civilizations, helping to establish the first human Zephyrian cultural exchange program. Jake's proposal involved splitting his time between both worlds, working as an ambassador while building a genuine relationship with Thalonix based on choice rather than obligation. They would take things slowly, getting to know each other as individuals while working together to create understanding between their species. Thalonix was surprised by the proposal, but intrigued by its possibilities. She had expected either acceptance or rejection, not a completely new approach that honored both of their cultures while creating something unprecedented. After careful consideration, she agreed to try Jake's experimental partnership. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in either human or Zephyrian history. Jake and Thalonix made vows of cooperation and mutual respect, rather than traditional marriage promises. They committed to working together while maintaining their individual identities and the freedom to choose their own futures. Kirithis played an important role in the ceremony, serving as a symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. She was growing up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable with human and Zephyrian customs. Her very existence proved that the two species could not only coexist but create something beautiful together. The success of Jake's solution became apparent over the following years. The cultural exchange program he helped establish brought unprecedented peace to their sector of the galaxy. Young humans and Zephyrians learned from each other, creating new technologies and artistic expressions that neither species could have developed alone. Jake and Thalanix's relationship evolved slowly but steadily. They learned to appreciate each other's differences while finding common ground in their shared values of protecting the innocent and working for the greater good. The mental bond between them became a source of strength rather than obligation, helping them communicate and coordinate their efforts. 5 years after that first rescue mission, Jake stood in the observation deck of a new type of ship designed jointly by human and Zephyrian engineers. Kirithes, now a teenager, worked alongside human and Zephyrian crew members who had grown up together in the exchange program. Thalanix joined him at the viewport, and together they watched as ships from dozens of species docked at the peaceful trading station they had helped establish. Jake realized that his simple act of compassion toward an injured child had ultimately created ripples that changed the entire galaxy. The story proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't superior technology or military tactics, but the ability to find common ground with even the most alien of species. Jake's willingness to save a stranger's child had demonstrated that cooperation and understanding could overcome the barriers of culture, biology, and ancient prejudices. Through patience, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being, Jake and Thalanix had created a new model for interspecies relationships. Their success showed that love and partnership could grow from shared trials and mutual understanding, creating bonds stronger than any ancient law or political alliance.